Nick. I'm from Miller Place High School, which is on Long Island, and I've been teaching AP Literature and Composition for over a decade. And once again, I'm going to talk to you about narrative. It's one of those skills and it's one of those techniques that an author uses that's so easily overlooked because we often just identify it. But in this video, like the others I've done, I'm going to show you why I think it's so important. So let's get started. In today's video, I want you to have 3 key things that you learn and 3 key things that you take away. The first is the third person omniscient point of view. I had touched upon this in a previous video, but I thought I'd come back and give you some more information so that you could see it in context. I'm going to talk a little bit about how it differs from objective and limited, and we're going to see a text. We're going to do a close reading of a text that has third person omniscient, and we're going to come to that thing that I said just a second ago. We're going to see why it's important. All right, this is all review, so I'm going to read it right off the screen. It's probably stuff that you've heard a million times before, but I think just the repetition helps a lot. And that is, third person point of view exists when the person telling the story is on the outside looking in. The narrator is not a character in the story. Of course, if the character is in the story, that's when we have first person point of view. Now with third person, there are 3 types. Objective. Now that's when the narrator does not convey the thoughts or the feelings of any character. And in a way, it's very neutral. You just get almost a reporting style of the events of a story. Limited is when a narrator knows the thoughts of a single character, or maybe 2 or 3 at best. But omniscient, and this is what we're going to focus on today, is when the narrator is aware of the character's thoughts and feelings. I use this example because it comes from Latin, and it's one of those things that almost like PEMDAS has stayed with me since middle school. My middle school English teacher talked about omniscient comes from the Latin meaning all, omni means all, and where we get the word science, the root word comes from Latin, scientia, that means knowledge. So, of course, omniscient means all-knowing. Hopefully that stays with you too. All right, here's our example, and it's from The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. I'm going to read you this text here, and I just want you to pay attention to point of view. It's what we've been focusing on. You'll probably know right away that it's third person, but maybe as I read it, try to pick up on the clues that let you know that we're getting an insight into the thoughts and feelings of characters. Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. It was her sister Josephine who told her, in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. Her husband's friend, Richards, was there, too, near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when the intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram, and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. Now, I want to focus on that very first part of the very first sentence, knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble. From the start of the story, we're getting an insight into what the characters know. We know what they know, that she has a heart trouble. And of course, this is the first bit of evidence that's going to direct me to the point that this is third person omniscient. There's one more thing that I want you to focus on. It's right there. He had only taken the time to assure himself. There's no way we would know that if we didn't know his inner thoughts, because it's not something that he said, it's not something that he did. It's a feeling, it's a thought that he had. So from these 2 pieces of evidence, I'm getting an understanding that we have a narrator that knows the thoughts and feelings of characters. We also see it here a little bit later in the story, and this is in reference to Mrs. Mallard. This is after she's received the news of her husband's death, and she thinks to herself, there would be no one to live for during these coming years. She would live for herself. There would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination. How do we know it's third person omniscient? So we're getting the thoughts of another character. I said that from the beginning, but we know what's going on in her mind, that there would be no one to live for during these coming years. We also learn that there would be no powerful will bending hers. This seems really close and intimate, like we're getting deep inside her mind as to how she's processing this news of her husband's death. And finally, as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination, we're getting a sense of what she is seeing. So why is this so important? Well, third person omniscient. It is distant because the narrator is not a character in the story, yet it feels so close. And that last passage, I think, demonstrates it perfectly because we are so intertwined with her thoughts. We're feeling what she feels. We're thinking what she thinks. In this story specifically, I think it builds sympathy for the protagonist. If you remember that first sentence about her heart trouble, so the news had to be broken to her gently. And here's, I think, a key thing, especially in the story of An Hour. It creates tension between what other characters see. I think they see her grieving and what we know, that she's not necessarily grieving, but she's thinking something else. So it's almost like in the plays where there's some type of irony. We know something that other people don't. And I think that's kind of cool. All right, what should we take away? As we exit this video, I'm going to give you a brief overview of everything that we've learned so far about narrators. Now, if you remember with third person, there are 3 types. Objective, often when the narrator is neutral. Limited, when the narrator knows the thoughts of a character, a single character, or maybe a few characters. And omniscient, when the narrator's all-knowing. Going back to when we looked at Cathedral, I also talked about first person point of view and how there's an intimacy there because you're seeing things through the lens of one person. But because it's only one person, in a way, that lens is going to be biased because you only see what they see. But as we leave this video, here's the key thing. I started off by talking about power. And I enforced the idea that whoever tells the story has power over that story because they're going to control the narrator. They're going to control the narrative. But in a way, each point of view has certain strengths and certain powers. There's also certain limitations because we can't see everything. And here's the thing that I want to leave you with. It's your job as a reader to ask those questions about what a narrator knows and what they don't know, what they're revealing, and maybe what they're keeping from you for a deliberate reason. Because I think really good authors do this really cool skill. They choose a point of view that best suits their story to create some type of suspense, intrigue, connection, interest, all those things that make reading so enjoyable. All right, in my next video, I'm going to start talking about claims, and we're going to use some of these same short stories, and I'll show you how to build claims and gather evidence to support them. So I hope you join me, and as always, be well, my friends.